generally speaking, social media a lot of the times isn't reality. And since we're all chronically on it online, we start to believe that it's reality, right? Because that's the reality we're living in. We're not living in the actual reality.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Truth Talk podcast. Today I'm joined with Bradley. If you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself for the people that might not know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So the brand is Mighty Brad, and we kind of dive into on my YouTube channel a lot of self-development, relationships, spirituality, and then I'm also a self-development coach. So going along with that, that's how the whole journey started based on the podcast, which I started around a year and a half ago. It was definitely it was an interesting start because I was depressed for a few years, was able to get over it by developing myself, building my confidence, increasing social skills, all that different type of stuff, changing my viewpoint and perspective on this reality. And after a few years, around 3, 4 years of developing myself, I decided to start the podcast. And then from there, coaching just kind of naturally fell into place along the lines.
Yeah, and how did you kind of get the idea to start a podcast? Like, was it just something that you had seen and you were like, I want to get into it, or?
Yeah, so I would say since I first embarked on my self-development journey, I started to watch a lot of podcasts. I watched Joe Rogan a little bit. Chris Williamson nowadays is my absolute favorite podcast. I had the pleasure of actually meeting him in person, had a great conversation with him. Super down to earth guy. And so I really enjoyed podcasting, and I felt like I had a decent amount of knowledge to share, and I started to actually really care about other people's perspectives and how they view the world and how we can riff on that together. If we might disagree on something, what the different perspectives are. And so when I was in high school, my junior year of high school, my buddy of mine, my buddy Jack, we're still best friends to this day. He kind of was one of the few people who viewed life the way I did, looked at life a little bit deeper, kind of saw past, you could say, the lies of the school system and the society and the way we're brought up. And we're like, hey, let's start a podcast together. So we did, ran about 9 episodes. First 2 episodes we did by ourselves. The rest of them we had kids on from high school. We had girls on to talk about relationships. It was a fun time, and we got that was my intro to being on camera and expressing how I felt about certain topics that is out of the ordinary for 16, 17-year-olds to talk about most of the time. So that was pretty fun. And then I went to university down in Florida for a semester, and I believe so rolling it back a little bit, around maybe March of the year I went away to college. Before I went away to college, me and Jack basically fell off in terms of producing content for the podcast. So I thought to myself in the back of my mind, I feel like I want to start my own. Like I really enjoy doing this. And 2 days before, it was either 2 or 3 days before I left for university, going to a different state, not knowing anyone there, completely new life, you could say. I was like, you know what? Let me just start the podcast. Let me start something. So I called up two guys that I knew. One of them, his stage name was Rudy Rhymes, who was a rapper, and he's actually in my band now, which is funny enough. So I knew him, and I was like, you know, he raps. He went to my high school. Let me have him on the podcast. Let's see if we have a nice conversation. It went very well. And the same day, I had my buddy Loren, who made tons of money in Bitcoin and crypto when it first became a thing. So I was like, oh, has a decent amount of knowledge on finances and the world and stuff like that. So that was how that started. And then when I got to university, from some of the people that I met down there, did some podcasts. And then once I stopped going to university there, when I came back, that's when I really started to focus on the brand a lot more and having more guests on, and specifically
Yeah,
a lot more online ones, because obviously you can only have so many people on in person when you're not, you don't when you have a million subscribers, you can fly
yeah,
people out to your place.
yeah. And kind of how did you like pick people for like what you wanted to talk about? Like, I guess one step back, what did you kind of talk about in like those initial podcasts? Was it just like thoughts about, I mean, I guess you could tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So my whole philosophy, since I was super into the self-development space, was kind of to just talk about how to make your life better, what different people's perspectives were on how to do that, how does society view these things, how's the government playing a role in all of this, and culture and all of this stuff. And so, we talk a lot about music and how that's connected to influencing people. A lot of the self-development concepts in terms of, anxiety. And to roll it back, to answer your question specifically, the first few podcasts was really my intro to hearing people's different perspectives. So the second guest was really knowledgeable in finances and crypto and stuff. That was a new concept for me. So I was like, hey, it would be cool to learn about this, pick his brain, ask him questions. And the first guy, Rudy, who, was a rapper, I was like, oh, well, it would be cool to talk to someone who makes music because I'm a drummer as well. And so it was just it was not super focused on anything in the beginning. And now, as time has progressed, it's very much centered around making your life a better place, new knowledge and perspectives on how to do that, different spiritual teachers and coaches and business owners and people who come on, psychologists, and people of all these different realms who have these different inputs on how to do this, because let's say how to build your confidence is there's so many different perspectives to
Yeah.
how to do that. And when you hear these different ranges of people in different industries and experts, you get so many different insights on how you can do that. And you just listen to these people and you're like, I never knew you could do it like that before. And then you experiment with the knowledge, and it's just it's been a beautiful experience for me so far. Made so many great connections with the guests, became friends with people, and the main mission with it is for anybody who's watching to actually gain value from it. And even if it's just one thing, take one thing from that episode, flip your life around, incorporate this habit, view your life in a little bit of a different light, so that you can become a little bit more productive, a little more mindful, and make your life a better place.
Yeah, yeah. And for me personally as well, like just like starting the podcast and kind of like starting to talk to different people, you instantly learn a lot more because you get to talk to all these different people, you make these connections like you're saying. Um, and I mean, to me, that's the reason that I did start the podcast because I kind of wanted to talk to different people and like just hear different perspectives about like particular for me, it's business, right? Like kind of business and that sort of thing. But I always love to hear everybody. Like I don't really care that much as long as you kind of have like I typically do it like based off personal brand. Like if you have a brand, like I'd love to have you on and come talk. Um, but yeah, and I mean with the podcast, how did that kind of develop into like coaching and everything? Like how did that side of the brand build out?
Yeah, that's a good question. So like I mentioned before, after I came back from that first semester at university, I really started to go more full force with the podcast.
Mm.
And, I really wanted to,
Did you drop out of university
so
or
I stopped going. I had a pretty shitty time there.
mm,
I met some really cool people, but I've never enjoyed school, and it's always been a drag for me. And I didn't take any classes I enjoyed. I wasn't a party guy, so I didn't really fit in. And I spent a lot of my time alone there. My mental health went a little bit down the drain, and so I took a semester off. I said I knew. Listen, before I even went to college, I knew it wasn't for me, but I figured I'd try anyway. And so I ended up taking a semester off, and then I was like, you know what, let me try it again. And then I went to a community college near me just to take some psychology classes that I thought I enjoyed because I love studying psychology on my own time. And still didn't like it. So after that semester, which was 2 semesters I got ago, I guess at the time of us recording this, I finally said, okay, there's no point in me continuing this. It's not doing me any good. It's draining me. And so rolling it back to that first semester I took off after my first semester, took the next semester off, and I went more full force with the podcast. And in terms of getting the online guests and choosing to have who to have on, I really I stumbled upon a few creators on TikTok and Instagram that I just thought their content was cool, and I'm like, hey, let me reach out to them and have them on here.
yeah.
And so that's how that kind of developed, and made some really cool friendships and met so many cool people so far. And then over the next few months, one of my mentors, um, who's a business coach, reached out to me, and we hopped on a call, and he was, giving me props for all the content I was putting out and the brand I was building, what I was doing. And he said to me, you're doing all this and that. It's like, it's awesome. Have you ever thought about coaching? And I thought to myself and I said, No. I think I knew what, life coaching was and self-development coaching and coaching in general. I knew what it was, but I didn't really dive into it much. And so I didn't think it wasn't a matter of I don't think I can do this for myself. It just wasn't in my state of consciousness. I just wasn't really aware of it. And so he brought that up to me and I thought about it. I was like, yeah, maybe that's something I could do. And so long story short, me and him started working together and he was giving me, tons of tips, business advice, sales stuff, and how to build out the brand more, how to actually build a business with it. And I started to do that. And, over the last, around a year, a little less, building all of this stuff out has been definitely been a difficult journey in terms of, dealing with procrastination and having to do the schoolwork alongside of it and feeling drained from doing that and all these different things. But that's how it started. And I'm very grateful. I tell him all the time, his name's Corey. I tell him all the time, like, Corey, I'm very grateful for you because I don't think like if we didn't get in contact, I don't think I'd be doing this right now because he's really the one who came up with the
Yeah.
not come up came up with the idea, but brought it into my existence. And so it was like, yeah, wow, I think I can actually do this. And then from there, the past few months have been a great deal, a great journey and experience to start working with people, actually help people make changes in their lives and
Yeah.
do what I would have needed when I was depressed. Like if someone of what I'm doing now, someone like me came to me when I was depressed, it's like this would have helped me out so much. And so there's a lot of talk about in this space of, build a business around and an offer around what your younger self would have needed. And for
Yeah.
me, that fit in absolutely perfectly. If when I was 13 and, down in the dumps and depressed, and hated my life and someone came to me and said, hey, here's these self-development concepts, this is how you can build your confidence, this is how you can do this and that, or some options for this, it would have been enlightening for me. So
Yeah.
that's how that started.
Yeah. And like there's two things to that I want to like point out. Like the first thing is like you build out this brand, right? And a lot of people really struggle with this is like how do I monetize this brand? Right? Because I have like, this following of, X amount of people and like I want to get a product out to them and actually start making money off of this. And like for you it was coaching, but for other people it could be like a variety of things. It could be, any sort of product or anything like that. And that's like one thing that a lot of people struggle with, which in my opinion could be like the easiest part of like you have this group of people that like you for who you are. So like let's offer something to them that could help them. And then the
Yeah.
second thing is like, well, you go ahead if you want to.
No, I was just gonna make the point of that point you're bringing up of people liking you for you. I also think, at least in my personal experience and from most of the people I talk to, the importance of authenticity when building out your
Yes.
brand
Yeah.
because listen, I see every day people's videos that I come across and I read their body language and I say, I don't think they really care about this. Like they might, maybe they're like, I don't know them personally. So it's like, but I get the vibe of, maybe they're just doing it for money or maybe they're just doing this. And, I get I get guys every day reach out to me. Hey, I can do this for you. I can help you out with this. And, there's been plenty of opportunities that have come from that. And I've actually started to work with people from that. But then there's other guys where the way they talk or something, I'm just like, I don't think they actually really care about this. They're just kind of doing it to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think authenticity is key. Like when we do this podcast, like I mean, how long we talk for like what, like 2 or 3 minutes before we hopped on and like we just hopped on, we talk. I mean, it's not like we're having like these super prepared, segments with all this stuff. Like I like to hop on and just talk to the person because honestly, I think that's what the viewers want to see and that's the most authentic way to do it, in my opinion. Now, I mean, I've seen other people where they have it a little more structured and they kind of have things that they want to hate on, but I mean, honestly, to me, authenticity is key. Then the other thing that I wanted to point out is like for me personally, like I also think that target audience is like me like a couple years ago, right? Like I felt like I was in a state where I really wanted to try something in terms of business and I just didn't really know what to do, right? I felt like everything was, just out of reach. Like I would want to, but I couldn't, right? And then for you, I feel like it's the same thing of like what would an old me need or want, right? And I mean, is that kind of like what you think about when you're putting out content?
That's a very good question. I wouldn't say I think about me. I definitely, in my mind, don't really imagine myself specifically, but I do imagine
Mhm.
people. I try and make content that is valuable, and for somebody who either was in a similar position as me, I suppose you could say, or just anyone who makes wants to make their life better and is struggling with discipline or procrastination or whatever,
Mhm.
or finding your passion, whatever the case is. I do my best to say words that not only inspire but actually give you, some sort of
Facts.
actionable step and thing that you can do to change your situation. And so yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, and like okay, going back to the coaching, right? So you have this idea of like getting into coaching. You have this idea of like, you know, this is kind of what I'm gonna do. What actually did you start coaching people on? Was it like just, self like confidence or, self-development? Like what type of coaching were you doing?
Yeah, so nowadays I label it as self-development coaching. So
Mhm.
obviously it's a very big umbrella. Like I said before, I was bringing up confidence, social anxiety, mindfulness
Discipline.
and discipline, all just everyday tasks and habits as options. Like for example, meditation, running, the gym. And it's like some people might say, "Oh, that sounds so basic." And they are basic components, but that's where we start. It's like when I first start talking to someone, it's, "Hey, where are you at right now? Where, what are you struggling with? And where do you think there can be some improvements?" And the thing I really enjoy about coaching is, you can just say something and someone can be like, "Oh yeah, wow, I should try and do that and that." But then there's also ways that you can coach where you word something in a certain way, you ask certain questions, and you actually get the person to answer their own question of something they've been struggling with for a while. Like, hey, I don't know. I was talking to someone the other day, and I think it was yesterday actually, and he was struggling with incorporating the gym and working out into his routine.
Yeah.
And he was trying to figure out how to do it. And, I simply asked him, because he said, it's not something that I'm really prioritizing right now. I'm prioritizing this instead. And I'm like, okay, how does that make you feel? Like, do you feel fine not working out? Do you feel like a little slumped without it? How do you feel personally about it? And he was telling me, and then I said to him, what's stopping you from incorporating just that few minutes of physical activity in every day? And he's like, oh yeah, there's not really anything. Right. And then that's kind of something where it's like I kind of geared it towards that. But there's certain situations where you kind of, because people, if you listen to every word that somebody says, there's usually something in the phrase or the sentence that they say that shows some sort of room for improvement or some sort of, I feel like this person already knows that they could be improving on this, or they know the change they can make. It's just they've been struggling to actually do it. And then you're like, and then they finish talking, and I say, "So in that last part, you said that you feel this way about it. Why is that?" And then sometimes people are like, "That's a good question." And then it forces them, not I don't want to use the word force, but it gets them, it gets their mind flowing to answer their own questions. And so I think a beautiful thing about coaching is it's not always just saying do this, do this, do that, but it's, hey, how do you feel about this? How do you think you can improve? And people sometimes find the answers to their own problems. And then people could say, "Oh yeah, well why do I even need a coach?" You don't need a coach. You don't need a coach. It's something that can be very helpful though. Like some people are naturally, you could say naturally gifted, or they don't struggle with the discipline at all. In that case, it's like for example, sometimes when I'm talking to prospects or talking to certain people or having conversations, once in a blue moon. This doesn't happen often, but I remember one guy specifically was like, "Oh, so you're gonna tell me," before I even, mentioned any of the coaching, I was just, asking him how he was doing and what he was struggling with. And he was like, "Oh yeah, so you're gonna tell me that I can't improve unless I buy your shit." And I said, "No, you can absolutely improve on your own time and without a coach.
Yeah.
It would just, in your situation that you're dealing with, it might be helpful for you. Like the whole point would be to work with a coach is to work with somebody who is in the position that you would like to be in, and they're farther along on their journey. So they have tons of tips and knowledge and information to give you that, listen, you could probably learn a bunch of that knowledge on your own time, but it would take a long time. Like for me personally, it took, you know, 4 or 5, it's been 4 or 5 years since I've been on my self-development journey. In most of the time, like the first 3 years, I didn't have no coach, I didn't have a mentor, I was completely by myself. And, you can make immaculate progress by yourself. You don't ever need to invest in a coach. But if you're struggling and you just want a little bit more accountability, you want a jump start, you want someone who's further ahead of you to work with you one-on-one and say, hey, these are some options of how you can do this, how do you feel about this, and really get you to delve into your mind, you can make the progress that you would make on your own time in 2 years, where if you're working with a coach, you might be able to make it in 6 months, for example, just as an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, and I think that applies to not only like self-development, but nearly anything like business or anything that you want to do, having a mentor or like a guide for like kind of what the next steps are is really helpful. And I feel like there's this, I guess, feeling around like coaching and everything, especially lately. That I don't know if you've seen it as well, but like especially in like the business scene, like in the agency space in particular, where there's a lot of people like dropping like putting courses out there, and it's kind of like there's almost like this stigma behind it of like, oh, that's kind of a scam. Like that's almost like like you know what I mean. And I don't know if you've experienced that. Has that like affected you at all, or would you say that that's played a role?
Yeah, so I mean I suppose I would say, yeah, I would definitely say, since there's so many more creators nowadays, people generally speaking are a little bit more skeptical when somebody
Mhm.
reaches out to them or somebody offers them something like this, because there's always the conversation of, and like people would ask me and my friends of like, oh Brad, why would someone work with you when they can work with this person? And it's like, well, from where I'm starting, I don't charge that much money as most of the other coaches do, for example. And like people are like, oh, well, why would someone work with you as a smaller creator and not, somebody who has 1 million subscribers? It's like, well, because the person who has 1 million subscribers is probably charging $500 an hour for their time. A lot of
Yeah.
people don't have $500 an hour to spend, right? And so, but to go back to your, your original question of, has it affected me? I wouldn't say in the sense of my personal motivation to actually create courses and create the community that I've built out and all this type of stuff. I wouldn't say, it definitely has been a thought in my mind of, yeah, I know there's a lot of people doing this, but I got to the point where I was pretty confident in the information that I was putting out and my experience with it, that I wasn't worried that, okay, well, what if nobody ends up liking this, or what if nobody ends up working with me? Because, and there were thoughts of that, of the imposter syndrome, like especially more towards the beginning, before you get the experience, like doing the thing in the space, you can sometimes think to yourself, like, am I really qualified to do this? Like, I don't know, man. Do I really have the experience? And then I had that, and to a certain degree, not like 100%, but I thought about it occasionally. And once I started actually hopping on coaching calls and answering people's questions and guiding them in a certain direction, and seeing that people actually took knowledge from what we were talking about, and because I was there and talking about certain things, I realized, hey, I'm not that bad at this. This is something that I'm actually helping people with. And so when you get the experience more, that imposter syndrome dissipates a little bit. And I wouldn't say, like, for me it's completely gone. Because there's I mean there's especially since I'm 20 years old and I'm
Yeah.
coaching. Alex, you know how many people come up to me and say, Brad, you're 20 years old. What life experience do you have? How are you going to tell people about this? People come up to me and they say, if some dude's struggling with his bills at 45 years old, how are you going to coach him on that? And I think to myself, well, number one, my target audience isn't helping 45-year-old guys paying their bills, but
Mhm.
I would say that if some guy who is struggling with his bills and 45 years old came to me and worked with me, there are probably certain mindset shifts and perspective changes and habits he can change in his life, and different ideas we can flow and riff off of, where maybe he can start this side hustle, or maybe he can do this in his job to make extra money, or whatever the case is. But that's not even my target audience, right? And so people are always like, all right, well, you're 20 years old. What do you know about life?
Yeah.
A lot of the concepts that I am talking about helping people with are things that I have immense experience with. I've been on this path around the past 4 or 5 years, and at one point, for around a year and a half, 2 years straight, like that's, or at least a year minimum, that's all I did. Like I literally stopped hanging out with my friends as much. I didn't really focus on school that much. And I went to school when I was in high school and first started the journey. I went to school. I did my best to always keep myself in a positive frame and learn new information as often as I could. I would come home, learn new information, apply it, cycle, repeat, 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 next year, year and a half. And so there's not that many people who have done that, right? A lot of people are getting into self-development and the space, which is absolutely incredible. But I suppose my point is there's been a lot of pushback, especially from people in my personal life and this and that. And I think with any business endeavor, most people are always going to get that because people say it's risky. People
Yeah.
say, what if it doesn't work out? I can't
Mhm.
tell you how many times my friends come to me and say, dude, what if it doesn't work out? The other day, my friend's telling me you have to have a plan B. I said, no, I don't have a plan B and I don't want a plan B. And listen, you like people can disagree with me on that. Like there's so many different perspectives to that. And there's no, in my opinion, with all this stuff, there's no starter guide to life. There is no right or wrong answer. It's just what you think. And I've come to realize that a lot of what people think isn't actually based on true knowledge. For example, people just have this perception in general that business is risky and going to college is the safer route. In some cases, you could say it. I mean, but then again, you can see countless articles and people
Going into debt and
writing a blog post how in college they have 3 degrees and they can't not only are they in debt but they can't even find a job when they were guaranteed they were told once you get the college degree you're just going to get a job and you're going to be making good money, and it's like sometimes the reality is skewed. This is obviously depending on the situation for the person, for the degree, everything, but in terms of the riskiness conversation, what I think about is, wouldn't it be more risky to go down a life path that you know isn't right for you? For example, people say me doing this business endeavor is risky. I know I don't enjoy school. I know I have a huge distaste for it. I've never enjoyed the work. I've never actually learned anything from being there. And it's taken so much of my time and my energy over the course of my 20 years of life here so far. Why would I, this is just for me personally. I'm not saying don't go to college if you want to go to college. For me personally, why would I still go if I know I don't like it, if I know. And so in my personal case I thought to myself, okay, the only reason I would finish university is to become a psychologist. And I thought to myself, oh, I don't want to go through the 4 years of school. I don't want to go through the 6 years of school, the more than 6 years. And some people can look at me and say, Brad, you're just fucking lazy. And I would say, okay, you can think that. But the way I think about it is started to think to myself, well, wait a minute. I'm going to school for psychology. I've learned more about psychology studying it on my own time than actually being in the classroom. And I'm starting this coaching business where I'm basically doing, I'm not a therapist, but I'm doing certain things that a therapist would do. Why am I why am I going to continue going to school for and in hopes that I can do something that I'm already starting to do? It didn't make sense
yeah.
to me. And some people would say, well, you're not credible if you don't have the degree in this and that. And to a certain degree, and to certain people's perceptions, absolutely. There will inevitably along this journey, I'm sure that, maybe a few times somebody will say to me, Brad, you don't have a college degree. I don't trust you. And there might not be any type of objection handling that I can do that will
Yeah.
allow them to work with me just because that's their viewpoint. If you don't have a degree, I don't trust you. But I have found, in my personal experience so far, a lot of people nowadays are caring less about college degrees. And I think that's a good thing because if you look at the amount of classes that you take in the field, the degree that you're taking, it's usually like less than one third of the classes you're taking have to do with your actual major. And
Especially if you go to like a liberal arts school, you're not even,
which most of them are.
yeah. Yeah.
And so from my personal experience, I asked myself that I don't know why I'm doing this anymore, why I'm putting myself through this. I've learned, and I tell people all the time, I credit 95% of my knowledge to my own experience, to my own knowledge or my own experiences watching YouTube and doing the podcast and talking to people, not from sitting in the classroom. From sitting in the classroom, I've gotten my energy drained. I've got teachers who don't actually care about what they're teaching, just be a mope whole time throughout high school. And it's just like it's just this negative environment, and you're just like, what am I doing here? And so I felt that way ever since I was, ever since I was 13 when I was depressed. I always thought I don't at that point I wasn't aware enough to like pick the pick apart the societal structures and be like, oh, this is why this is school is this way and this is why people are being controlled and this and that. But I always had this feeling that something was wrong, and now I finally understood it. And that's not like again, this is not me saying if you want to go to university, don't go to university, but it is me saying you know you don't want to go to university and you have an idea of something else to do instead that you're passionate about, you should probably do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm, through that college process right now, like I'm figuring out like what I want to do after because I'm 17, I'm in my junior year of high school, right? So this is like, this is the time period where like, to get to a college, this is kind of the time where you build up like that resume and you start applying and start going through that process. But there's like a few things about college that I would say that like I don't think me personally at least like I don't think I would go to college like per se, and I know it's kind of weird to say, but like I wouldn't go to college to learn necessarily, right? Like you're kind of going there like you're saying for people like for that I guess authority that you get from that degree. And then like the network, right? Like if you're going to a university and you build out, a group of people who are going to be high achievers, right? And or like are likely to that you could leverage these connections to do whatever you want, honestly. And the other thing for me personally, like I want to go to like a very from my like personal experience, like I want to go to a very, very like prestigious university like Ivy League or and I think I'm definitely in like the pool of people who are could make it into a university like that. So I think it's a little bit different if you're going to maybe like a community college or another college than if you're going to like a prestigious university in the sense of like if I start a conversation and I'm like, look, I went to Harvard, like hold on, whoa, like you know what I mean? Like, there's sort of an authority or a sense of like accomplishment that comes with that. I don't know if you get like that, you kind of get where I'm coming from with that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% see that. And yeah, I mean like especially among the older generation, like people's parents, like obviously parents care about their kids a lot, but a lot of parents are like, in my opinion, a little overboard where they're they very much value someone that goes to Harvard and then they look down upon someone who wouldn't go to an Ivy League school, which in that case, I obviously I can't speak for you, but it doesn't seem like you view it that way. But like a lot of people are kind of like yeah, my kid's better than you and blah blah blah. And I think if you're I think if you're viewing it that way, there's a lot of there's a lot of unknowns there. Well, why are you hating on people who aren't, didn't go to
Yeah,
that school or this and that? It's like there's no
so
purpose to it. It's like
reason.
it's like listen, you can be absolutely proud that your son and your daughter went to Harvard. I'm not saying don't be proud of
Yeah.
them, right? Harvard is definitely a school that's very fucking difficult to get into. But I think from my perception, the whole authority viewing because you went to this university is not always
I guess authority is not the
credible.
right word. It's like,
I understand your point
mhm,
completely. I'm just saying from my perspective, I wouldn't like, for example, I don't care if somebody went to Harvard or not. That's just me though.
yeah,
To your point, many people in society very much
yeah.
care about that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing with that is these schools are so difficult to get into. And that's honestly the whole reason that you go to them. I kind of want to say that because, getting into Harvard, it's like a 3% acceptance rate or whatever it is, right? The super, super low acceptance rate. And if you're getting into a school like that, the whole point of going to a school is the people that are getting in are the highest achievers, right? The highest achievers in the classroom, right? And obviously, like you're saying, like for you, the classroom, like learning in school wasn't like, that doesn't really mean much to you. But like to someone else, if you're going to school for, an engineering degree or like something that you want to do, like college kind of is that pathway. And if you say like, I went to Harvard to do whatever, right? Like some career path, then you're instantly like regarded as a little bit more credible just for being amongst that, 3% that was able to get into the school. And then with that as well, like you're going to be around people who are in that top percentage and you're making that network, right? So everyone that you're speaking with at Harvard or at, one of these top universities, they were able to get through that, that hump of like, all these different people. So these are people who at the very least, they're dedicated, they at least put some effort, right, to get there. They think that this is the way for them to go, right? Um, so it's easier to build a network in a school like that, if that makes sense from that point of view.
Yeah, and I love that perspective because the way you're phrasing it, if you like you get into Harvard and you go to Harvard, all the people there had to go through that same tedious, difficult process as you did. And whether you view getting good grades in school an achievement or not, it still marks a lot of dedication, a lot of
Yeah.
time, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And so you're naturally going to be surrounded by most of all of those people are at least a higher achiever to some degree, right? It's like,
Yeah.
of course, you'll meet some certain people that are like book smart and, nothing else, right? But then there's tons of people who have that mix of both. Like that, you could say the street smart and the school smart, and then also being able to be social and all this type of stuff. So in
Yeah.
that case, it's like the way you're phrasing it, like absolutely, you will 100% be among those people who are at least a higher achiever to some degree, and that's worth something.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I guess with schools as well, like there's it's kind of you to go to college, you kind of want to have to know what you want to do because like from my point of view, I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday and I was like, I know what I want to do. Like I want to do business, like I want to run my own business, and that's like I've already figured that out. Like that's what I want to do. And he's like, well, I want to go to this school and I'm probably gonna be there for 2 years and then I'll figure out what I want to do. And I'm like, why are you going to college if you don't even know like what you want to do? Like I feel like if you're going to college, you have to have like at least a pathway or some sense of like what you want to do. And I mean, it's fine for him if he wants to go to school, kind of try different things out and see it. Like, sure, go for it. But for me, it feels like kind of like a waste of that time to like if you don't know what you're doing. Like, might as well go try things out outside. I don't know if you've experienced that across your path of coaching, I guess.
Yeah, I would say, it's a very tricky conversation and just idea because obviously there are cases where people who don't know what they want to do go to college and they figure it out. Like
Yeah,
for example, I'm not going to reveal what exactly my dad does because it's private but in terms of like government type of stuff. But he didn't really want to go to school and he didn't know what he was going to do and things kind of lined up for him and he kind of just found out about the job opportunity after he got most of the right credits and then he decided to do that and he's been doing it ever since and he really enjoys it. And so there's certain cases where you don't have any idea what you want to do. You go to college, you figure it out. I
mhm,
think what more often happens in terms of if we're looking at statistically, a lot of people change their major over and over again. People graduate with degrees and they don't even use the degree, or at least if they don't
yeah,
use the degree, they get a job in a field that may need it. You have needed the degree, but it has nothing to do with the major they majored in. I don't know. I think one research study or one area of expertise. It was probably a year ago that I looked at this study, so it could most definitely be updated by now. But I think it was over 70% of college graduates in the U.S. got a job in a field that had nothing to do with their major and what their degree was, right? And
yeah,
so, and it's like to that point, it's like some of those jobs worked out for people and they happen to need the degree, even though along the 4 year journey they still had no idea what they want to do, and then they figured it out after. So in that case, it ended up really working out because then if they didn't go to school, and then they may not have ever discovered that job opportunity, and they may not have ever, they wouldn't have had any progress in that degree. And so if they wanted to get that job, then they'd be delayed a few years and then start going to school, have to do the 4 years, right? So it's such a tricky and so it's so
yeah.
much dependent on the individual and how they view life, what they want for themselves, what they don't like. And there's so many different components that go into it. So it's like we can never sit here and say a black and white answer of
Like this
what
is for
someone
you.
should do
Yeah,
in that.
exactly.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
But it's always worth it to like for anybody who's struggling to figure out whether you should continue college or not, whether you should drop out, whether you even want to go in the first place, whether you should go for this degree or that degree, it's definitely worth having a conversation with tons of different people and getting different perspectives. And it's like you don't have to agree with all those perspectives, but at least you have them. And so it's like in my process, I talked to tons of people who supported college, tons of people who didn't, and in my recent decision to stop going, I talked to a lot of people who were actually in the coaching space and
Yeah.
obviously the area that I wanted to get into. And these guys were talked to a bunch of different people. They're making the money they want to do. They're really passionate. They're traveling all the time. They're doing all this stuff, and they enjoy their lives and they enjoy the work that they do. And so, having a bunch of thoughtful conversations with certain individuals, they help me uh, realize what I wanted for myself, right? And what
Yeah.
everyone wants for themselves is completely different. And it's always a tricky thing because you have to make sure that whatever decision you make is your decision and not somebody else's. You can get someone's input that can then spark a thing in your mind that says, oh yeah, I actually realize I personally want to do this. But sometimes we can get a little mistaken and like, oh, and then we realize like a year down the line, oh, I made this decision because
Because
this
of
person
somebody
wanted
else.
me to do this, right?
Yeah.
And so I think my whole proponent and my whole what I push is whatever you do with your life, make sure it's what you want and not what everyone else wants for you.
Yeah, yeah, and for me personally, like because I'm trying to relate everything to my situation to give viewers, I guess, like a real life example. I still don't know like what I want to do, right? Like whether it's college or whatnot, but I kind of have an idea of like, okay, if I like for me personally, it would be if I get into like one of these top universities, like that's likely what I'll do. If I don't, then there's I have like another plan that I have in mind of like what I kind of want to do and everything. Um, but I have very clear in my mind what I want to do. So it's a different situation than someone who's like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm gonna major in, like what I want to do. Like I have very clear in my mind, like I want to do business, I want to work here, I want to grow this brand, I want to, do all these different things. And I have kind of like a life plan in my head, right? So it's easy for me to say like, oh, like I have this to do, but for someone who doesn't, could be different, right? And like to your point of like, whether should I drop out or not, and like should I drop out of college or high school or whatever it is, right? Um, I've talked to, and this is kind of like on a tangent, but I always hear a lot of people like, oh, like if especially in the business and the agency space of like, oh, like if it's working, you're making like this amount of money, you should drop out. You should go. And I feel like there's a lot of survivorship bias with that, right? Like you hear all the stories of like, oh yeah, I dropped out, like I'm making, $50,000 a month or $10,000 a month or whatever the number is, right? Doesn't really matter. Um, but you don't hear the stories of the people who dropped out and then had to, go do, whatever it is, right? Because you just don't hear those stories of like people who ended up working in places that they didn't want to work or do things that they didn't want to do because they hadn't like followed through with that, right? So I think it's definitely really dependent on each situation, like we were talking about before, but don't, like I think you have to think everything through really logically before you make a big decision like dropping out or something like that, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then also, I mean, the good thing obviously it depends on the person's situation, financial situations, obviously, because college is so expensive nowadays.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like the good thing about school is you can always go back if you have
Yeah.
the money, of course. And
Yeah.
if you don't, then if you're willing to get in debt, that's a whole nother conversation. But the good thing is like school is always going to be there, and certain things like business opportunities might not always be there in the way they are now. And that's not to say that like if you're thinking about doing business, but not university, it's like, just drop out or just don't go. Because a lot of the times it's like you could you could very well do both at the same time. It's like it's possible. And it
Yeah.
it just depends if you want to do that or not and what the situation
Totally.
is for you. And it's like, that conversation, what your point before, that it was a good point because, there was one of my buddies, his friend, who is now my friend, has been in business endeavors for the past few years, and he's made a lot of money, and a lot of money to the point where you would ask yourself, why is he still in school? And then the reason he's still in school is because he's already 3 years in, he's almost done. He's like, he has the money to do it. He's like, yeah, let me just finish it, right? And so it's like some people would look at that and say, why would you do that? And my
Yeah.
first thought was like, yeah, why is he still in school? But it's like there's so many different perspectives to this, and it's so important to, like we were saying before, just understand that everybody's on a different journey, and what works for this person might not work for this person, and vice versa, right? And whatever people want to do, they're going to do, whether it ends up being something worthwhile or not. But I think that all goes back to focusing on yourself, right? We can't be so
Yeah,
focused on what this person and that person is doing. And listen, it's hard to do because comparison is all over the internet. It's painted on the walls in society and every building you walk
yeah.
into. Everyone's always comparing themselves to each other. And, everyone's always feeling like they're falling behind in life. And it's like,
What's
there's
the
been
quote?
times in my
It's
past that
comparison is the thief of joy. Is that
exactly.
yeah. So
There's rarely any situations where you compare yourself to other people and you actually benefit from it. Now, there's
yeah,
certain constructive criticism and certain conversations and viewing people that are better than you in your space that can definitely help you out and push you forward. But a lot of the times, there's a lot of things that just you're comparing the way this person's life ended up in a positive way, and you're looking at yours and saying, well, mine's not as good as that. But you guys you were born in different areas.
there's so many
You were
variables.
born with
You can't
different
just say that, right?
different amounts of money, different experiences, different friendships, different relationships, different romantic partnerships, different life experiences, different everything. And so we're comparing ourselves to these people and saying, well, why am I not like them? It's well, because you're not them. You're different. And that's not bad. Like we have I've come to realize that so much of the time we have like different, it's just bad. Why does different have to be bad? I think different can be great. And in fact, when I meet somebody that's different, I tend to like them better than the people that seem like they're all the same. Like if I meet, I use the example, like if I meet 10 people and nine of them are, doing the exact same thing as the other person, talks in the same manner, and is basically a clone of each other, which seems to be happening in the world a lot nowadays. But then I meet someone who just does something a little different, or they view this in a different light, or they think about this like that. It's like they're more interesting to talk to. And so the people that are different are the people that are innovative, people that are usually content with their life, the people that are going places. And that's not to say, to compare that to, if you do, because going to university is the normal thing to do. It's not saying that's bad, but it's like I think the whole biggest thing that's been the whole difficulty of our society and our world as a whole nowadays is that people know basically nobody knows what they want, and we have so many distractions in today's world that people aren't looking to see what they want. People don't know
Yeah,
what they want, and they're not looking to see what they would want. So it ends up this cycle of people just doing barely anything and just doing what they think they have to do. Like, for example, going to college because they want to party, or they just want to hook up with people, or they finally want to be social, or this and that. And it's like those can be factors. It's why you want to go. Not saying you can't do that, but if your priority and the only reason you're going to college is to party, like what are you doing? What are you doing, man? And it's like
yeah.
the quote that I always go back to is a man who lacks purpose distracts himself with pleasure. And I think that's what we're doing nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, and you see that with like just like our everyday distractions and everything. It's like, they're just TikTok and Instagram and like social media, and then you have like I mean, I don't know about how it is in your school, but like in my high school, like if I go into the bathroom, it smells like weed. Like it's to the point where, there's just distractions everywhere, and it's easy for people to get off that path if they don't have like a good structure and they don't know what they want, right? Which is what we're saying right here of like nobody knows what they want to do, so they just kind of just going through it, right? Um, yeah, yeah. The other thing with college is like, there are a lot of people that do want to do like that party stuff, and a lot of people that I have spoken to of like that lifestyle of like, partying and like doing that. But I feel like there is also like these colleges are so big that there is groups of people that you can find that are like actually just there to get their degree, just do whatever they want to do, right? And that brings it back to the other point of like you can do both, right? Like sometimes business and school, or like whatever it is, like for you it would be or, maybe psychology and school at the same time, or whatever it is. Like it's all about finding that balance, I feel like, with what you're doing, right? Because at the end of the day it kind of depends all on what you want. And I mean, I spoke to like a business owner, like my uncle, he owns a business, and he's telling me like for him, it's just his goal is just to keep growing the business. But if someone's happy doing their job and just doing whatever that is, then they're just as successful as him in his eyes, right? It all depends on what you want, right? Because at the end of the day, it's just what makes you happy and what you want to do in life, right?
Absolutely. There's this obviously the rising hustle culture, the rising if you don't make $1 million, you can't you're not going to be successful. You see all these street interviews with girls saying if he makes less than $500,000 a month, then I won't even look in his direction. And so, guys are struggling and they're like, well, what am I supposed to do with myself? How the hell am I supposed to make $500,000 a month? Whatever the case is, right? And I think I think our first point of view that's going wrong is that we're just viewing social media as reality, which a lot of the time it isn't.
Yeah.
People, girls especially, they love being on camera and just saying shit, right? And so, like, the same girl that's on camera who has 5 million views that says, I won't date a guy who makes less than $50,000 a month is dating a guy who's making $5,000 a month, right? It's like it's not, and it's sometimes that girl genuinely believes that, and she won't date anyone like that. In that case, she's probably not going to find a husband, right, or a partner. But generally speaking, social media a lot of the times isn't reality, and since we're all chronically on it online, we start to believe that it's reality, right? Because that's the reality we're living in. We're not living in the actual reality. It's like there's this picture that I absolutely love where it's like somebody like an animation of a dude who looks just like completely horrible and he's just doom scrolling on his phone and there's a picture of Jesus and I'm not a religious individual but there's a picture of Jesus and this guy's like oh, why is my life so bad like everything sucks and then Jesus just says above him bro go outside like
Yeah.
if you go into the real world you see and you talk to people you see that so much of the time it's not like that. It's so much different. People sometimes, because obviously there's mean people out there, a lot of people are friendlier than you think. A lot of people are open to having a conversation. A lot of people are open to meeting new people. A lot of people
Yeah.
are struggling
And like
just like you are.
going back to that like conversation of like everyone like tries to fit into like these buckets, I want to say, right? Where you're kind of like and society I think tries to do this to us. And I mean we can go into that, but I mean just overall like society tries to put us into these buckets of like kind of who you are, of like, oh, I do this and I hang out with these people, or I do this and I do whatever it is, right? And try to separate us. But like realistically, like there's so many things that we have that are in common, right? That you just don't think of. Like, you could come up to someone and ask them about almost anything. Like, I guarantee you're gonna find something in common and make a conversation, make a friend, right? It's a lot easier than a lot of people think. Like, people are humans, right? Like, you could come up talk to one another, and it's not as difficult as some people make it seem. I feel like,
Yeah, and it's and we view it as something being more difficult because of how chronically online people are and how everyone's like in public, people are just on their phones and people like in the gym. It's like I think about how probably when the gym first became a thing, like popular years and years and years ago. I don't know when the gym really became popular. Let's say it was the 80s. I don't know. But I think when it first started, it's like that was the place to go. It was the brotherhood. It was everyone helps each other lift. Everyone does this. And it's like you still see this but not very often. Everybody's got their
no,
headphones in. Everyone's minding their
yeah,
own business. Girls are posting videos about, the guy who looks at them because they're attractive for like 1 second and then, makes fun of him like, oh my God, he's a creep, whatever the case is. And so like people are afraid to talk to people nowadays. Guys are afraid to talk to girls. People are afraid to talk to each other in real life nowadays because people see the stuff online of, oh, girls are like this or guys like this, and then they just assume it's reality when a lot of the times it isn't. And it's like, especially in recent times for me, I've been doing my best to put myself in a good mood each and every day. And when I'm at the gym, like just talking to people. Like if somebody I made it a habit. If somebody asks to working with me or do a set with me or I ask them or I'm right next to someone, like I'll just start a conversation with them and I ask, hey, what's your name? Hey, what do you do for work? Hey, and then this and that. It's like some people happen to know. It's like I went up to a dude the other day and introduced myself and he's like, hey, like, aren't you friends with blah blah blah? I'm like, yeah. And then it's like you would have never known if you just kept your headphones in and minded your own business, right?
Yeah.
And it's like in my personal experience recently, it's like, dude, people are fine with talking to people and they're actually happy to do it too because they're probably thinking the same thing of like, everyone's in their own zone and then it's like it's hard to be the first person to step out of the comfort zone and do
Yeah.
what nobody else is doing, right? But if you can do it, that's how you make a change.
Yeah. And like I guess I'm guilty of this too, of like in the gym just kind of like minding my own business, just logged in, like doing my thing, right? I don't even typically like unless I'm going with friends, I'm just like, just really focused on what I'm doing and just not really paying attention to anything around me, right? But for me, like the space where like that happens the most, and I haven't been able to do this in a while, but is go play soccer, go play sports. That's like the main place where like I build like these friendships, and I don't even really know how to describe it. It's like when you go to this place, like everyone's talking to one another, and you have people from like I go play soccer at a field close to my house here, and it was like it's like every Tuesday and Thursday and I think sometimes on Saturdays we go out and it's these guys from all over the world. I mean, there's a big group of people from Nigeria. There's a big group of people there's a guy from Morocco, like just South America, Central America, people all around the world. And sometimes we don't even speak the same language, and we're all having fun. Like we're all talk. Like after we all talk, we all and it's like this big community of people that you could go hang out with and have a good time, right? And that's like the strongest power, in my opinion, of sports, right? Is just like put everything aside, like let's just focus on this and let's try to win, right? And I guess that's kind of the space for me where I find that. And I haven't been able to do that because I actually I tore my ACL 5 months ago since surgery. So I haven't been able to do that in a while, and that's something that I have been missing of like just being able to go out there and go, talk to people and play and everything. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, for me, that's kind of the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like that experience you're talking about, the community is what we're missing nowadays. And I keep going back to social media and online, but we're spending so much time on social media that we're not making connections with people. We're not actually talking to people in reality. And it's like human beings need some sense of community, especially, I coach young men and, I'm very much into, becoming masculine and making your life a better place and adopting these new habits. We're missing the community. We're missing the brotherhood. It's not here anymore. We're alone and there's even like these traps in the self-development space where it's like, hey, cut everyone off and just
Focus on yourself.
meditate for five
Yeah.
hours a day and just go to the gym and ignore everyone and this and that. And it's like you can make progress by doing that, but social connection is very important too. And so what I've realized is doing self-development along with social situations is an amazing conversation because there's no better way to learn how to talk to people than by actually talking to people. You can
Yeah.
read as many self-help books as you want and you'll gain knowledge, but you won't be able to fully apply it and actually learn how real people work until you actually experiment and actually talk to people. And so I think if we can like social anxiety is probably one of the leading fears of our generation. And it's if we can start to overcome that and start I always talk about taking small steps, like not even talking to having a full-blown conversation with someone you want to talk to, but literally just, hey, you walk past someone you like their shoes. Hey man, I like your shoes. Thanks. Keep walking. Don't talk to them anymore, right? And then because like some people are I used to be so socially anxious to the point where I could not hold a conversation or want to hold a conversation with somebody new, right? And so it's like in that case, start so small. And there's a lot of sometimes shame around this of starting small. But listen, give someone a compliment, keep walking by. You're in a line with somebody waiting for food. Hey, how you doing today? Hey, I'm doing good. How are you? Oh, I'm doing good. That's it, right? You don't gotta ask them for their number. Don't gotta go talk to a girl and ask her this and that. Just keep it simple. And even if you're struggling to talk to girls, you don't have to have a full-blown conversation with her. Literally just go up and ask for a number. See how it goes. Experiment with things. Because you can't, it's not that you can't learn information by not experimenting and doing things in reality, but you're not going to get a grasp and your confidence will not fully build unless you actually do the action. It's like if you want to become confident in talking to people, you could
For
read
sure.
50, 100, 200 books. It's not going to do that for you. It's only the action. That's what I realized for myself. And listen, I think something like social anxiety as a whole, it might not be 100% depleted in your life. Like there might be moments where, because there's still times where like if I'm in a certain mood and I'm not in like a great mood, it's like I'll get a little anxious to go and talk to someone. But also, even when I do feel anxious to talk to someone and then I go do it, it then reinforces the fact that it's not a big deal. Like for example, I started doing public interviews in recent times, and when I get to the scene or the place where I'm gonna ask people to do interviews and go on the strip, whatever it is. When I first get there, I get a little anxious. I'm like, all right, well, I gotta go talk to people. I gotta ask people if they even want to do
Yeah.
this. Gotta have the conversation. Gotta hold the conversation. This and that. And then once I get myself to just talk to one person, it goes
So much easier.
fine. And
Yeah.
then after that, I feel like I'm on top of the world. I'm like, all right, let me go ask this person that. It's like so much of the fears that we have about social situations in life are bullshit. They're all limiting thoughts. I can't do this because of this, or this might go this way, when there's probably a 0.00001% that chance that that situation that you're worried about is even going to
Actually
happen.
happen.
And
Yeah.
so it's like, and once you start to, if you're the type of person who is just scared of people and thinks people are mean and like the world is a horrible place, starting with those small steps of just giving someone a compliment, just asking them how they're doing, you'll start to prove yourself wrong pretty quickly.
Yeah. And for a lot of people, especially like my age, like I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and I was talking to him about, how school is just kind of a social place. And I almost view it as a social place as well, because it's like I realistically, like at school, like obviously since I am trying to go to like a university like that, I obviously have to do my work, and I have to do all the stuff that they're asking me to do. But the main reason that school is like somewhat like bearable is because I have that social aspect of like, I'm not, luckily for me, like I'm not like, I don't really have that many problems of like talking to people and everything. Like I'm fine with, obviously, like there's times where like, maybe I don't want to come up to a random person and talk to them or whatever, but I'm perfectly fine holding a conversation. Like I don't have any problems speaking to people, and I already have like a good group of friends. So it's like I'm fine with talking to everyone. I speak to a lot of people, especially at school. It's like, every class, like I'm talking to someone, I'm having conversations and everything. And for a lot of people, that's kind of the space where the only time they really ever talk to people. Like they go home and it's like, yeah, like I kind of talk to people, but like not in a social way, right? Like, and I almost feel like for myself, like I obviously have a group of friends that I can like call at any time and be like, yeah, let's go do this or let's go do that. But if someone doesn't have that group of friends, like starting conversation, everything, I could see how that could be really difficult. And I guess since I don't have much experience, it's easy for me to say like, oh, you just go talk to people, right? But it really is just like, that compliment and the best way that I've seen it again is like sports or games or some sort of thing where you have a common goal. That's instantly you're gonna make a better relationship like that of like, oh, we have to do this or we have to do that together. And I guess that's why school is a social place for a lot of people, is because you guys do have a common goal, like finish this assignment, or like we're sitting together, we might as well talk, like, right? Um, but yeah, that's definitely something that like after people graduate, like where are they going to get that social side of things in person, right? um like if they're not going to, like, if I guess it would be in like wherever they work or whatever it is, but it's an interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, it very much is because, like you're saying, school is generally speaking societally said as a social place. So is the place you work at, the business you're at, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But and that's all fine to talk to people.
Yeah.
But once you're in public in a place that isn't your place of work or school, you can't go up to people, man. There's like that. That's
Yeah.
the social construct, right? Everyone needs to be in their own zone, and it's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? I went to the city yesterday and I was waiting at the train station and some guy, perfect example, like we were just talking about before, there was some guy who had really nice shoes. And I
Mhm.
said to him, I said, I really like your shoes, man. And it's like usually you're sitting at the train station, there's tons of people waiting. You don't talk to people at a train station. You mind your fucking business.
Yeah.
Especially when going like people, New York, we were going into New York. New York is the city of not giving a fuck about anybody else but yourself and just ignoring everyone,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like, breaking those barriers because they're not real barriers. They're just social constructs, but they're not reality. Like you can, I think when you start to break down those barriers, you start to see what life is really like. Because so much of the social constructs aren't what life is really like. And it's a huge issue that our generation and so many people are dealing with. I think there were a bunch of surveys done for young men, and I don't remember what the age range is, but the average amount of close friends that that young men said they have was zero. Zero close friends. And it's like we're all so isolated. We're also let me go home and just play video games. Let me go watch porn. Let me do this, right? And it's like it's destroying us because we're not getting any grasp of what reality is like. And yeah, I think if you're struggling with being social, your first step to self-development, you could say, is becoming a little bit more social.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And in terms of like the friends thing, like for me personally, like I have a group of, 4 or 5 friends who I'm like, these are like if I need something like whatever it is, like I call them, I talk to them like pretty much on a daily basis, like outside of school, like I can give them a call at any time. And I know we'll have a conversation. We'll like, oh, let's go to the gym, let's go do this, right? And having that group of friends is like the best thing because let's say that I don't have a school, right? I would be in my room honestly, I'd probably be working for, you know, 50 however long, like 65% of the day, 70% of the day. And then that other 30% is like, gym and whatever else, like going eating, whatever it is, right? Like I'm trying to maximize the time that I'm working and trying to grow, especially like now. But if I didn't have those friends for that time, like I feel like I wouldn't, it would be very difficult to like, okay, why am I doing this? Like, you know what I mean? There's a sense of I guess mm, I don't know what the word for it would be. I guess community. I don't know. With having like a small group of friends that you could call at any time and just like, you know, even if it is like, like you're saying, like playing video games. But if you're doing it with friends, it's different, right? Than if you're sitting in your room on an online lobby, like or online place doing whatever, right? Yeah, I mean, and it sucks that a lot of people don't have that. And another issue that people run into with that is like they're friends with, and this is like the opposite side of the spectrum is like they're friends with everybody, and you're talking to everybody. You're not really close to anybody, and it's like you might be friends with all these people, or you talk to all these different people, but at the end of the day, like you go home and like you're not really close enough with any of them to be like, oh, like let me give you a call, right?
Yeah,
So it's
that's
interesting to see both sides of the spectrum.
yeah, that's why people talk about, having one close friend is better than having 100 acquaintances
Yeah,
because, those acquaintances aren't going to be there for you when you need them or when you'd like them to be, or you're in a difficult time. It's like that person who's actually close to you and really cares will be. And
for
it's
me,
like,
it's more of that group, like having like that group of like people, and like you have different groups like at school and everything, and you try to, because everywhere that you go, you see that people are always like grouped up into different things. Like you're never really like fully together with anybody, but having that group of like 4 or 5 people that's like these are like it's like almost like a brotherhood of like people that you could just be like anything that you need just give me a call or let's go hang out here. It's just last minute things. That's what I feel people are missing. Not necessarily like one close friend is great, but just a group I feel like is the best way, at least in my experience.
I would very much agree with that. The community and the brotherhood is what we're missing, especially as young men. Because
Yeah,
when a guy, a young man gets isolated and he has no social connection, he doesn't talk to any girls, things get pretty dark, right? It's like this is
yeah,
where the depression sets in. This is where the anger, the uncontrollable emotions set in, and the negative perspective of the world and yourself, and you retreat inward and you neglect the outside world, and then when you do experience the outside world, you because you're so angry and depressed, you can't enjoy it and you can't see anything good about it. And so yeah, the I think without social connections, life goes to shit. No matter how successful you are, you could say.
yeah, yeah. Well, we've been going on for I think about an hour now. So is there anything else that you kind of wanted to cover or talk about? I mean, I think we had a pretty valuable conversation, pretty interesting conversation for any viewer that's watching.
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a great conversation. I really appreciate you having me on, Alex. And yeah, I hope people got some value from this and had some things that might clarify certain perspectives or something that they can take away and try in their life.
Yeah, totally. All right, so thank you for coming on, Bradley. I'll have all your stuff in the description of this video, so you can go check that out, and Instagram, YouTube, all that. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.